I still remember the exact moment my world shattered. The polished mahogany conference table gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights. 24 executive chairs filled with familiar faces suddenly turned foreign. And my husband Robert's voice, crisp and businesslike, as if he weren't dismantling our life together. The board has unanimously decided that Westbrook Industries requires new leadership to navigate these challenging market conditions, he announced, not even looking in my direction. Effective immediately, Claire Westbrook will be stepping down as Chief Operating Officer. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I froze, my coffee cup suspended halfway to my lips, the scalding liquid suddenly forgotten. My fingers trembled ever so slightly, the only outward sign that I'd just been blindsided by my own husband in front of our entire executive team. "Robert," I managed, my voice eerily calm despite the hurricane raging inside me. "I wasn't aware we were discussing leadership changes today." His blue eyes finally met mine, and I hardly recognized them. Cold, calculated, devoid of the warmth that had once made me fall in love with him 22 years ago. "The decision has already been passed by the board, Claire. We can discuss the details privately after the meeting." A flush of humiliation crept up my neck as I glanced around the table. Some averted their eyes, unable to witness my public execution. Others, particularly Victor Harlow, our chief financial officer and Robert's longtime golf buddy, wore barely concealed smirks. They'd known. They'd all known except me. Somehow, I made it through the rest of that meeting. I took notes. I offered insights on our upcoming product launch. I even managed a tight smile when Robert introduced Meredith Chen, a 30-something MBA from our competitor, as my replacement. She would be shadowing me for the transition, he said. A transition I was hearing about for the first time. "Claire has been invaluable to Westbrook's growth," Robert continued, his voice dripping with practiced sincerity. "And we're grateful for her years of service. Her institutional knowledge will be crucial during this handover period." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Service. Like I was the company janitor being thanked for keeping the bathrooms clean. Not the woman who had worked 80-hour weeks for 2 decades, who had postponed having children to help build this company from the ground up, who had sacrificed everything for Westbrook Industries for our company. At least, that's what I had always believed it to be. When the meeting finally ended, Robert motioned me toward his office. I followed him mechanically, my mind racing, cataloging the signs I should have seen coming. The closed-door meetings I hadn't been invited to, the sudden interest in our corporate structure from the board. Robert's late nights strategizing for the future, as he'd called them. As soon as his office door closed behind us, I dropped all pretense. "What the hell was that, Robert?" My voice was low, dangerous. "Claire, please. This isn't personal." He loosened his tie and sank into his leather chair, looking almost relieved now that the announcement was over. "Not personal?" I nearly choked on the words. "You just fired your wife in front of everyone we work with, without even the courtesy of a private conversation first, and it's not personal?" He sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "You're not fired. You're being transitioned to an advisory role. The severance package is generous." "I don't want a severance package." I slammed my palm on his desk, making him flinch. "I want my job. The job I've done exceptionally well for 15 years. The company I helped build when it was nothing but you, me, and a rented office above that Chinese restaurant on 7th Street. Something hardened in Robert's expression. "The board feels we need fresh perspectives. Meredith brings connections to Asian markets that we desperately need right now." "The board?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean you and Victor and those other 2 golf buddies you appointed last year? Don't pretend this was some democratic decision that happened to fall out of the sky. You're being emotional, Claire. Those 4 words, every woman's favorite thing to hear when she's being systematically pushed out of what she helped create. I own 30% of this company, Robert. Or have you forgotten that? He had the decency to look uncomfortable. No one's touching your shares, but as CEO and majority shareholder, I have to make decisions for the company's future. He leaned forward. Look, the industry is changing. We need to be more aggressive, more innovative. And I'm what? Too old? Too cautious? The irony was suffocating. At 45, I was 3 years younger than Robert. You've been resistant to some of the directions the board wants to take, he said carefully. The Miyazaki deal, the restructuring of our European division, because they were terrible ideas that would have exposed us to enormous risk. The Miyazaki deal would have violated 3 separate regulatory guidelines, and you know it. Robert's jaw tightened. The Miyazaki deal had been his pet project, a partnership with a Japanese tech firm that would have looked impressive on paper, but would have entangled us in a legal nightmare I'd spent months preventing. This is exactly the problem, he said, coldly. You can't see beyond your cautious by-the-book approach. Westbrook needs to take chances to grow. I stared at him, suddenly seeing our entire marriage with painful clarity. How long had he resented my prudence, my attention to detail, the very qualities that had kept Westbrook Industries from crashing and burning during the recession of 2008, the supply chain crisis of 2020? So that's it. 15 years as COO, and I'm just done? You'll transition Meredith over the next 30 days. The advisory role pays $200,000 annually, which is more than fair. You can work from home, come in for quarterly board meetings. Most people would consider it a dream arrangement. Most people wouldn't have built this company with their bare hands. I fought to keep my voice steady. Most people wouldn't have put off having a family because their husband said, just a few more years until the business is stable. Something like guilt flickered across his face, but he quickly suppressed it. Claire, please. This is happening. The paperwork is drawn up. Fighting it will just make things uncomfortable for everyone. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him understand what he was doing to me. Instead, I stood perfectly still, my mind racing toward the only question that mattered. How long? I asked quietly. What? How long have you been planning this? Robert shifted in his chair, suddenly very interested in aligning the pens on his desk. The board discussions have been ongoing for a few months. And Meredith? When did you start courting her? His silence was answer enough. I see. And I did see everything with excruciating clarity. Is there something else I should know about you and Meredith? His head snapped up. What? No. For God's sake, Claire, this is a business decision. I wasn't sure I believed him, but that wasn't even the point anymore. Whether he was sleeping with my replacement or not, he had betrayed me in a way that cut to the bone. I'd like to take the rest of the day off, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I think I've earned that much at least. Robert nodded, clearly relieved I wasn't going to make a scene. Of course. Take the week if you need it. We can start the transition on Monday. I turned to leave but stopped at the door. You know what's ironic, Robert? This company was built on my caution balancing your risk-taking. That was our strength. I guess we'll see how well Westbrook does without that balance. I walked out without waiting for his response, past curious eyes and whispered conversations. That ceased the moment I appeared. I collected my purse from my soon-to-be former office, not bothering to take anything else. I had a feeling Robert had already assigned someone to pack up my things, probably with strict instructions about what I should and shouldn't take home. The drive home was a blur. I moved on autopilot, barely registering the familiar streets of Oakwood Heights, the affluent suburb where Robert and I had bought our dream home 10 years ago. The Grand Colonial, with its manicured lawn and circular driveway, had once represented everything we'd achieved together. Now it just felt like another illusion. I parked in the garage and sat there, engine off, unable to summon the energy to go inside. For the first time since that morning's ambush, I allowed myself to feel the full magnitude of what had happened. 22 years of marriage, 15 years as Westbrook's COO. All those nights I'd stayed late while Robert attended networking, events. All those weekends I'd spent poring over contracts and financial projections. The fertility treatments we'd postponed and then abandoned because the timing wasn't right for the company. And this was how it ended, with a clinical dismissal in front of the very people I'd hired and mentored. A tap on my window startled me. It was Maria, our housekeeper of 8 years, looking concerned. "Mrs. Westbrook, are you okay? You've been sitting here for 20 minutes. Had it been that long?" I forced a smile and opened the door. "I'm fine, Maria. Just a difficult day at work." She gave me a doubtful look but didn't press. "I made your favorite soup for lunch, the tomato basil with the croutons you like." "Thank you." The kindness in her voice nearly broke me. "I think I'll take it in my study if that's all right." Of course. I made my way through the house. Our house, paid for largely with my bonuses and stock options from the early, risky years of Westbrook, when Robert had insisted on reinvesting his earnings back into the company. The irony wasn't lost on me. My study was my sanctuary, the one room in the house that was entirely mine. Robert had his expansive home office with its wall of business awards and golf memorabilia, but this smaller room with its wall-to-wall bookshelves and window seat overlooking the garden was where I felt most at peace. I sank into my leather chair, not even bothering to turn on the computer. What was the point? My professional life as I knew it was over. Robert had made sure of that. A soft knock at the door announced Maria with my soup. I thanked her and waited until she left before setting it aside, untouched. Food was the furthest thing from my mind. Instead, I reached for the bottom drawer of my desk, the one that contained our most important documents. Behind our passports and insurance policies was a slim manila folder I hadn't looked at in years. The original partnership agreement for Westbrook Industries, dated 20 years ago. Robert and I had drafted it with our first attorney, long before we could afford the high-powered legal team we employed now. I remembered how carefully we'd gone over every clause, how we'd promised to protect each other and the business we were creating together. I flipped through the yellowing pages, past sections on profit sharing and dispute resolution, until I found what I was looking for, a clause buried deep in the document, one that Robert had likely forgotten existed. In the event that either founding partner is removed from daily operations against their will, a comprehensive review of all corporate decisions must be conducted by an independent third party, and any decisions found to be made in bad faith or counter to the company's established ethics guidelines shall trigger a mandatory restructuring of leadership. I leaned back in my chair, the document trembling slightly in my hands. Robert thought he had outmaneuvered me, that I would quietly accept the generous advisory role he'd carved out like a consolation prize. He thought 20 years of building this company together meant nothing compared to his ambitions and his new vision. He thought wrong. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd never expected to use. James Harrington, a corporate attorney renowned for his merciless approach to company disputes. He had approached me at a conference last year, handed me his card, and said something that had seemed odd at the time. The most devastating weapon in business is a contract everyone has forgotten about except you. How prescient those words seemed now. His receptionist answered, and I didn't hesitate. "This is Claire Westbrook. I'd like to schedule an appointment with Mr. Harrington as soon as possible." "May I ask what this is regarding, Mrs. Westbrook?" I looked down at the partnership agreement, at our signatures, Robert's bold scrawl and my more measured script, side by side, promising to build something lasting together. "It's regarding a hidden clause in a contract," I said. a cold determination settling over me, one that my husband never imagined I'd need to use. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt since walking into that boardroom this morning. Power. Robert might have orchestrated my professional execution in front of our colleagues, but he had overlooked a crucial detail. I was still Claire Westbrook. I was still the strategic mind that had guided our company through crisis after crisis. And I still knew how to fight for what was mine. The battle for Westbrook Industries hadn't ended today. It had just begun. James Harrington's office embodied the man himself, sleek, uncompromising, and intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, the same city where Westbrook Industries had grown from a struggling startup to the corporate powerhouse it was today. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat across from him, the partnership agreement spread between us on his glass desk. "This clause," he said, tapping the yellowed page with one manicured finger, "is beautifully archaic. You don't see language like this anymore. Modern corporate attorneys would have buried it in subparagraphs and conditions. But is it enforceable?" That was all I cared about. James leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. In his tailored charcoal suit with silver hair precisely cut, he looked like Central Casting's idea of a shark attorney. Surprisingly, yes, it's straightforward, clearly worded, and was signed by both founding partners without duress. The fact that it's remained unchallenged for 20 years actually strengthens it. A small flame of hope flickered to life inside me. So, what happens now? Now, he said with a thin smile, we select our independent third party, someone beyond reproach, with impeccable credentials, who'll make Robert very, very nervous. He won't go down without a fight, I warned. Robert's entire identity is wrapped up in being CEO. He'll burn the company to the ground before he lets anyone question his leadership. James nodded, unperturbed. Of course he will. Men like your husband always do. That's why we're not going. To telegraph our moves, he slid a legal pad toward me. I need every questionable decision Robert or the board has made in the past 3 years. Contracts that were rushed through, partnerships that raised eyebrows, anything that made you uncomfortable, enough to object. I almost laughed. We might need more paper. 2 hours later, James had 12 pages of notes, a roadmap of Robert's increasingly reckless decision-making. The Miyazaki deal was just the tip of the iceberg. There was the European restructuring that had quietly laid off our most experienced engineers, the quality control protocols Robert had slashed to cut costs, the Russian investment group whose funding origins I'd questioned, only to be told I was creating problems where none existed. This is substantial, James said, reviewing his notes. Especially this Russian connection. If there's any hint of impropriety there, Robert said they were fully vetted. Even now, after everything, I felt that instinctive urge to defend my husband. 22 years of marriage didn't disappear overnight. By whom? James asked sharply. I frowned. I don't know. Victor handled most of it. Victor Harlow? The CFO who was smirking when you were demoted? I nodded, remembering Victor's smug expression during that fateful board meeting. Interesting. James made another note. The CFO fast-tracking foreign investment without proper vetting with the CEO's blessing. That alone merits investigation. He checked his watch. We need to move quickly. The longer you're transitioned out, the harder it will be to reverse. What's our next step? I'm filing for the independent review today. Meanwhile, you go back to work on Monday as if nothing has changed. Be accommodating, helpful. Make it clear you accept the transition. I stared at him in disbelief. You want me to pretend I'm fine with being pushed out of my own company? Exactly. His smile was cold. The last thing we want is for Robert to see you coming. Let him think he's won. Let him get sloppy. People who believe they've already defeated you tend to make mistakes. I left James's office with a strange mix of dread and anticipation churning in my stomach. Monday suddenly seemed both too far away and approaching much too quickly. The weekend passed in a blur. Robert came home late Friday night, long after I'd gone to bed. I heard him moving around downstairs, probably pouring himself a celebratory scotch. Saturday, he was gone before I woke up. Emergency meetings. According to his brief text, I knew better. There were no emergencies at Westbrook. That weekend, just a husband avoiding the wife he'd betrayed. Sunday night, he finally appeared at dinner. We sat across from each other at our dining room table, the antique mahogany piece we'd splurged on after our first truly profitable year, like polite strangers at a business function. "I thought we should talk before tomorrow," he said, cutting into his steak with precise movements. "About how we're going to handle this professionally." Of course. My voice was steady, betraying none of the rage still simmering beneath the surface. "I'll do whatever makes the transition smoothest for the company." Robert looked up, suspicious of my sudden cooperation. "Really?" "Because you seemed quite upset." On Thursday, I was shocked, I admitted, allowing a calculated vulnerability to show. "It blindsided me. But I've had time to think, and maybe you're right. Maybe I have been too cautious, too stuck in the old ways of doing things." Relief washed over his features. He'd expected a weekend of fights and tears, not calm acceptance. "I'm glad you understand, Claire. This really is what's best for Westbrook. And for us, ultimately. You've been working too hard for too long. For us." As if pushing me out of the company we'd built together was some kind of favor. "Tell me more about Meredith," I said, reaching for my wine glass. "Her background seems impressive." He launched into an enthusiastic rundown of Meredith Chen's accomplishments, her Harvard MBA, her work with Asian markets, her fresh perspective on the industry. With each word, it became clearer that Robert had been cultivating her for months, possibly longer. This hadn't been a sudden decision, it had been a calculated campaign. "You've certainly done your homework on her," I observed mildly. Robert had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "The board and I have been assessing our leadership needs for some time now." "Of course." I took a sip of wine. "And you're sure there's nothing personal influencing your enthusiasm for her appointment?" His fork clattered against his plate. "For God's sake, Claire, we've been through this. I'm not having an affair with Meredith. This is purely business." I nodded, not because I believed him, but because James had advised me to avoid direct confrontation. "I'm just trying to understand. It's a significant change for the company." "It is," he agreed, visibly relieved I wasn't pursuing the infidelity angle. "But a necessary one. You'll see, once everything settles." After dinner, I retreated to my study while Robert took a business call in his office. On a Sunday night, another red flag. Once I was sure he was thoroughly distracted, I connected to our home's secure network and logged into the Westbrook system using my still active credentials. I had 30 days of transition ahead of me. 30 days to gather evidence while continuing to appear cooperative. 30 days before Robert realized I wasn't going quietly into that advisory role he'd carved out for me like a retirement home for an elderly relative. Morning came too quickly. Robert and I drove to work separately, a routine we'd established years ago when our schedules rarely aligned. The familiar drive to Westbrook's gleaming headquarters in the city's business district felt surreal now. For 15 years, I'd made this commute as the company's COO. Today, I was driving toward my own professional funeral. The awkwardness was immediate. Heads turned as I walked through the lobby, whispers following in my wake. The security guard who'd greeted me cheerfully for a decade couldn't quite meet my eyes as he scanned my badge. My executive assistant, Jenna, was waiting by the elevator, her expression a complicated mix of sympathy and discomfort. "Morning, Jenna," I said lightly, as if it were any other Monday. "Mrs. Westbrook," she began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I'm so sorry about everything. I had no idea until the announcement. Neither did I admitted with a small smile. But we adapt, don't we? What's on the schedule today? She relaxed slightly at my professional demeanor. Miss Chen is expecting you at 9. There's a transition briefing in conference room B at 11, and Mr. Westbrook asked if you could join a call with Meridian Tech at 2. Miss Chen. Mr. Westbrook. The formality stung. For years, it had been Claire and Robert within these walls, our titles used only in the most official circumstances. Perfect. Lead the way. Meredith Chen was waiting in my office, with its view of the river and the artwork I'd personally selected. She'd already made herself at home, her laptop open on my desk, a framed photo of what appeared to be her family placed prominently on the credenza. Claire! She stood as I entered, extending her hand with practiced warmth. I can't tell you how honored I am to be working with you during this transition. Your reputation in the industry is legendary. Up close, she was even younger than He. Appeared in the boardroom, 35 at most, with a sleek black bob and the kind of confident polish that came from privilege and the best schools. I found myself wondering if she'd ever built anything from nothing, if she'd ever had to fight for her place at the table. Meredith. I shook her hand firmly. Congratulations on your appointment. I'm sure you'll bring valuable insights to the role. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing operations. A surreal experience as I explained processes I'd implemented and teams I'd built to the woman who would soon make them her own. Meredith took detailed notes, asking smart questions that grudgingly impressed me. Whatever else she might be, she wasn't incompetent. These risk assessment protocols you developed for new partnerships are fascinating, she said, scrolling through the documentation I'd pulled up. Though they do seem rather extensive. They've saved us from several potential disasters, I replied neutrally, including a near miss with regulatory authorities last year when one of our potential partners turned out to have significant compliance issues. Meredith nodded absently. Yes, I've been reviewing that case, though I wonder if we might be missing opportunities by being so cautious. And there it was. The first hint that she shared Robert's appetite for risk without my counterbalancing prudence. I made a mental note to relay this to James. The morning dragged on. At the transition briefing, Robert presided at the head of the table, explaining my new advisory role with practiced regret. I sat quietly, watching the faces around me, the executives I'd worked alongside for years, some looking genuinely saddened, others already shifting their attention to Meredith. The rising star. Claire will be available for consultation as needed, Robert concluded, but day-to-day decisions will now fall to Meredith. I trust you'll all give her the same support you've shown Claire over the years. After the meeting, I made my way to the small office they'd assigned me for the transition period, a stark downgrade from my executive suite, with no window and furniture that had seen better days. The message couldn't have been clearer. I was already being erased. I'd just settled in when my phone buzzed with a text from James. Third party selected. Judge Eleanor Winters, retired from corporate court. Impeccable reputation. Filing today. Maintain cover. Judge Winters. Even I knew that name. She'd presided over some of the most high-profile corporate fraud cases of the past decade, earning a reputation for thoroughness and zero tolerance for ethical shortcuts. If anyone could uncover the truth about Robert's recent decisions, it was her. A sharp knock interrupted my thoughts. Victor Harlow stood in the doorway, his salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed, his expensive suit a reminder of how well Westbrook's highest executives were compensated. Claire, he said with artificial warmth, getting settled in your new digs? Victor? I kept my voice cool but not hostile. What can I do for you? He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I just wanted to check in, make sure you're adjusting well to the changes. Very thoughtful of you. The sarcasm wasn't lost on him. Victor leaned against the wall, dropping the pretense of concern. Look, I know you're upset, but this is business, not personal. The company needs to move in a new direction, and sometimes that means making difficult personnel decisions. Personnel decisions, I repeated slowly. Is that what I am now? Personnel? You know what I mean. We all appreciate your contributions, but not enough to discuss my removal with me before announcing it to the entire executive team. I kept my expression neutral, remembering James's advice to appear cooperative while gathering information. Tell me, Victor, how long has this been in the works? The board vote seemed awfully well coordinated for a spontaneous decision. He shifted uncomfortably. These discussions have been ongoing for some time. The timing just happened to align recently. With Meredith's availability, I presume? Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. Meredith brings exactly what Westbrook needs. Right now, connections to emerging markets, innovative thinking, fewer inhibitions about necessary risks. Like the Russian investment group? I asked innocently. The one whose funding sources I questioned? His posture stiffened. Those investors were thoroughly vetted. Your concerns were noted but found to be excessive. By whom? By financial experts who understand the global market better than... He caught himself, but not before I glimpsed the condescension he'd always barely concealed. The point is, Claire, the deal was solid. Your objections were overruled. And now, we need to move forward. I smiled thinly. Of course. Moving forward is exactly what I intend to do. Victor studied me for a moment, clearly trying to decipher if there was a threat behind my words. Apparently satisfied that I'd been neutralized, he nodded. Good. Robert was concerned you might make this difficult. I'm glad to see you're being practical. After he left, I sat back in my chair, mentally reviewing our exchange. Victor had confirmed what I'd suspected. The decision to remove me had been in motion for months, possibly coinciding with the Russian investment I'd opposed. More importantly, he'd revealed that Robert was worried about my reaction, which meant my husband wasn't as confident in his victory as he appeared. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and forced pleasantries. I smiled when appropriate, offered insights when asked, and pretended not to notice how quickly people were adapting to my diminished status. By 5 o'clock, I was emotionally exhausted from the performance. I was packing up to leave when my computer pinged with a meeting invitation. Transition check-in with Robert and Meredith, scheduled for 7 a.m. the next morning. The early hour wasn't a coincidence. Robert knew I had a standing breakfast with my sister on Tuesdays at 7:30. He was already testing my commitment to this transition, seeing if I would rearrange my personal life to accommodate my replacement. I accepted the invitation without comment and shut down my computer. As I walked to the parking garage, my phone buzzed again. Another text from James. Filing complete. Judge Winters requesting all documentation related to Russian investment group by end of week. Step 1 accomplished. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, a grim satisfaction settling over me. Robert thought he'd won, that I would fade away into my advisory role, with nothing but a generous severance package and wounded pride. He had no idea what was coming. The Russian investment group is called Volkov Ventures, I explained to James, sliding a thick folder across his desk. On paper, they're a legitimate private equity firm specializing in technology investments, but there were anomalies in their documentation that made me suspicious. It was Wednesday evening, 3 days since I'd returned to Westbrook as a glorified consultant. 3 days of smiling through gritted teeth, of watching Meredith settle into my office, of pretending I didn't notice how quickly loyalty shifted when power changed hands. James opened the folder, scanning the contents with practiced efficiency. What kind of anomalies? Their corporate structure is unusually complex, subsidiaries nested within subsidiaries, holdings in 3 different countries. When I tried to trace the money back to its source, I kept hitting walls. I leaned forward, and Victor was oddly defensive whenever I asked questions. He rushed the due diligence process, which isn't like him. Victor's normally meticulous to a fault. How much did they invest? $20 million. It's the largest single investment we've taken since going public. James whistled softly. And this happened when? 4 months ago. Shortly after, Robert started having private meetings with board members. Coincidentally, that's also when Meredith Chen first appeared on our radar. James made a note. Judge Winters will want to see all communications related to this investment. Emails, text messages, meeting minutes, everything. Most of that would be on the company servers, I said. I can access some of it during my transition period, but anything marked confidential would trigger an alert to IT. Don't take that risk, James warned. We need to do this by the book. Judge Winters has subpoena power through this process. She'll get what we need legally. I nodded, though frustration churned inside me. Every day I spent playing along with this transition was another day Robert and Victor could be covering their tracks. There's something else, I said, pulling another document from my briefcase. Last week, before I was ousted, I found this buried in the quarterly projections. James examined the spreadsheet, his brow furrowing. These are preliminary plans. For a corporate restructuring? Exactly. A massive one. Cutting 30% of our engineering department, outsourcing most of our software development to contractors in Eastern Europe. But the strangest part? I pointed to a highlighted section. These contractors are all subsidiaries of a holding company called Arctica Global. Let me guess, James said, already connecting the dots. Arctica Global is somehow connected to Volkov Ventures. I can't prove it yet, but I suspect so. It would mean Robert and Victor are planning to take money from Russian investors, then funnel a significant portion of it back to them through these contracting arrangements. James sat back, eyes narrowed in thought. If true, that's not just unethical, it's potentially illegal, depending on how they've disclosed it. They haven't disclosed it at all, as far as I can tell. The restructuring plans haven't been presented to the full board yet. I only found them because I was reviewing budget projections for next fiscal year. This is exactly the kind of evidence Judge Winters needs to see. James tapped the document. Have you made any copies of this? No, I was afraid of leaving a digital trail. This is the only printout. He nodded approvingly. Smart. We'll keep this secure until the judge requests it. I glanced at my watch. 7:30 p.m. Robert would be wondering where I was. For the past 3 evenings, I'd told him I was having dinner with my sister, Elise. In reality, we'd meet briefly in a cafe. She'd leave, and I'd head straight to James's office to compile evidence. I should go, I said, gathering my things. Robert's getting suspicious about these late nights. James walked me to the door. We're filing the official notice of investigation tomorrow morning. Robert and the board will be informed by close of business. Be prepared for backlash. I took a deep breath. Once they know I've triggered the clause, there's no more pretending, is there? No, he confirmed. The gloves will come off. Are you ready for that? I thought about the past few days, the humiliation of clearing out my office while colleagues pretended not to watch, the condescension in Meredith's voice when she sought my input, Robert's calculated distance at home, as if I were already fading from his life. More than ready, I said firmly. My phone chimed as I reached my car, a text from Robert. Where are you? Meredith and I are at Salvatore's with the Miyazaki team. They're asking for you. I stared at the message in disbelief. The Miyazaki team was in town, and no one had bothered to tell me. Before my demotion, I would have been integral to those discussions, controversial as I found the partnership. Another message followed. If you can join us in the next 30 mins, that would be great. They value your insight. Translation. They were hitting a roadblock in negotiations, and they needed me to solve it. How convenient that my insight was suddenly Valuable again. I responded curtly. Just finished dinner with Elise. We'll be there in 20. Salvatore's was Westbrook's go-to restaurant for impressing clients. An upscale Italian place with private dining rooms and sommeliers who never raised an eyebrow at $1,000 wine orders. As I handed my keys to the valet, I straightened my shoulders and fixed a pleasant professional expression on my face. One more performance. The maitre d' led me to a private room in the back, where I found Robert, Meredith, Victor, and 3 Japanese executives engaged in what appeared to be tense conversation. Robert's face flooded with relief when he saw me. "Claire, thank you for joining us." He stood, gesturing me toward an empty chair between him and one of the Japanese men. "Mr. Tanaka was just asking about our compliance protocols for the data sharing portion of our agreement." Ah. Now I understood why I'd been summoned. The Miyazaki deal included significant data transfers between our systems, something I'd flagged as problematic months ago. Robert had overruled my concerns then, but clearly, Mr. Tanaka shared them. "Mr. Tanaka," I greeted him with a respectful nod. "I believe we met briefly when you visited our offices last year, Mrs. Westbrook." He returned the nod. "Yes, I remember our conversation about regulatory frameworks. Most illuminating." I settled into the chair, accepting the glass of wine Robert quickly poured for me. "I understand you have questions about our compliance measures?" For the next hour, I steered the conversation through the technical and legal complexities of international data sharing. Mr. Tanaka was sharp and well prepared, catching several potential issues that even I hadn't considered. Meanwhile, Meredith sat silently, clearly out of her depth on this particular topic, while Robert and Victor exchanged increasingly nervous glances. "So you see," I concluded, sketching a diagram on a napkin, "if we structure the data flow this way, with these additional security protocols, we address both U.S. and Japanese regulatory requirements without compromising efficiency." Mr. Tanaka studied my improvised diagram, then smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him all evening. "Elegant solution, Mrs. Westbrook. This addresses our main concerns." He turned to Robert. "We can proceed with the documentation based on this approach. I assume Mrs. Westbrook will oversee the implementation." An awkward silence fell over the table. Robert cleared his throat. "Actually, Meredith will be leading the project going forward. Claire has recently transitioned to an advisory role." Mr. Tanaka's expression cooled noticeably. He looked between Robert and me, clearly reassessing the situation. "I see. When did this change occur?" "Just last week," Robert said smoothly. "A planned transition to bring fresh perspectives to our leadership team. Claire remains a valuable advisor." Mr. Tanaka's non-committal response spoke volumes. He turned back to me. "Mrs. Westbrook, would you be available for consultation as we implement these protocols? Your expertise in this area is specific." Before Robert could answer for me, I smiled professionally. "Of course, Mr. Tanaka. I'm happy to advise on compliance matters during the transition." The rest of the dinner proceeded with strained politeness. When the Miyazaki team finally departed, Robert waited only until the door closed behind them before rounding on me. "What was that?" he demanded. "What?" I asked innocently. "I helped solve their compliance concerns, just as you asked." "You know exactly what I mean." His voice was low, angry. "Tanaka practically insisted on your involvement going forward. You made Meredith look completely ineffectual." Meredith flushed, staring down at her plate. Victor watched our exchange with undisguised interest. "I answered his questions professionally," I said evenly. "If that highlighted gaps in Meredith's knowledge, that's hardly my fault. Perhaps you should have better prepared her before pushing me out." Robert's jaw tightened. "You're deliberately undermining the transition." "No, Robert," I corrected coldly. "I'm demonstrating exactly what you're losing by forcing me out. There's a difference. The drive home was silent, tension crackling between us. Robert stared straight ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. I gazed out the passenger window, cataloging the city lights sliding past and wondering if this would be one of our last drives together. When we reached home, Robert headed straight for his office without a word. I watched him go, his rigid posture broadcasting his fury. Once, I would have followed him, tried to smooth things over. Now, I felt only a cool detachment. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom and began my nightly routine, wondering how we'd reached this point. 22 years of marriage, reduced to cold silence and professional sabotage. When had Robert decided I was dispensable? When had the company become more important than our partnership, in business and in life? I was just turning down the bed when my phone chimed with an email notification. James Harrington, subject line, filing complete. I opened it quickly. Notice of independent investigation delivered to Westbrook Industries legal department this afternoon. Judge Winters has issued preliminary document preservation orders. Board will be officially notified tomorrow morning. Prepare accordingly. My heart hammered against my ribs. There was no going back now. By tomorrow morning, Robert would know exactly what I'd done. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, listening to Robert moving around downstairs, the occasional clink of ice in a whiskey glass, the murmur of late-night phone calls. Around 2 a.m., he finally came upstairs, pausing outside our bedroom door before continuing down the hall to the guest room. I was up and dressed by 5, unable to bear the thought of facing him over breakfast. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Early, meeting with IT about system access during transition, and drove to a cafe near the office, killing time until the workday began. By 8:30, I was at my desk in the small transition office, reviewing documentation for a product launch I would no longer oversee. I'd been there almost an hour when the door flew open, crashing against the wall with enough force to make me jump. Robert stood in the doorway, a piece of paper clutched in his hand, his face a mask of rage. "What the hell is this?" He slapped the document onto my desk. The formal notice of investigation from Judge Winters. I met his gaze calmly. "It appears to be a notice of independent review, as provided for in our original partnership agreement." "Don't play games with me, Claire." He leaned over the desk, invading my space. "You're behind this. After pretending all week to accept the transition, you've been plotting this ambush." "I'm exercising my rights under a contract we both signed," I replied, refusing to be intimidated. "Or did you forget about that clause? The one that protects founding partners from being forced out without due process?" "Due process?" he sputtered. "This wasn't some arbitrary decision. The board voted unanimously." "A board packed with your golf buddies and yes-men. Hardly an impartial tribunal." Robert straightened, running a hand through his disheveled hair. For the first time, I noticed how exhausted he looked, like he hadn't slept in days. Good. Let him feel a fraction of the anxiety he'd caused me. "So that's your game?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet now. "Drag the company through some pointless investigation, air our dirty laundry in front of a judge, all because your pride was hurt?" "This isn't about pride, Robert. It's about integrity, about honoring the company we built together." I stood, meeting him eye to eye. "The clause requires an independent review when a founding partner is removed against their will. If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to worry about." His laugh was bitter. "And I suppose this has nothing to do with the Volkov investment you've been obsessing over? Or the restructuring plans you weren't supposed to see?" I kept my expression neutral, though internally I celebrated. He'd just confirmed my suspicions about the connection between Volkov and the planned restructuring. "The investigation will examine all relevant business decisions," I said carefully. "Judge Winters has quite a reputation for thoroughness." "Eleanor Winters?" Robert paled visibly. You brought in Eleanor Winters? The clause requires an independent third party beyond reproach. Judge Winters certainly qualifies. Robert stepped back, his mind clearly racing. This is insanity, Claire. You'll damage the company irreparably. Stock prices will plummet when this gets out. Client relationships will suffer. Is that what you want? To burn down everything we've built because you can't accept a change in leadership? I want the truth exposed, I said simply. Whatever that might be. He stared at me for a long moment, anger giving way to something that looked almost like fear. Then he straightened his tie, composure sliding back into place like a mask. Fine. Have your investigation. But remember, Claire, you started this war. Whatever happens next is on your head. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. Your access to company systems will be restricted, effective immediately. Security protocols during an investigation. After he left, I sat heavily in my chair, the reality of what I'd set in motion finally hitting me. Robert was right about one thing. This was war now, and wars had casualties. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Board meeting in progress. Sources say chaos. Stay at your desk. Document everything. I had just put my phone down when there was another knock at my door. Softer this time, hesitant. Jenna, my former assistant, slipped inside, her expression anxious. Mrs. Westbrook, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. I'm not supposed to be talking to you right now. Mr. Westbrook sent a memo to all staff saying you're under investigation and we should limit contact. Under investigation? I repeated, incredulous. That's not what's happening at all. I know, she said quickly. That's why I'm here. Something strange is going on. After the board meeting this morning, Mr. Harlow and Mr. Westbrook locked themselves in the server room with 2 IT guys. They were there for almost an hour. My blood ran cold. The server room? Where all our company data is stored. Jenna nodded. And that's not all. When they came out, I overheard Mr. Harlow telling someone to accelerate the timeline. He said, we need to move everything forward before she gets traction with this investigation. Jenna, this is important. Move what forward? Did he say, specifically? No, but... She hesitated. There was a video conference after that, with someone they called Mr. V, Russian accent. They closed the door, but I heard them discussing the restructuring announcement. Mr. Westbrook wants to do it. Next week now, not next month as originally planned. I took a deep breath, processing this. They were speeding up their plans, trying to get ahead of the investigation, which meant there was definitely something to find. Jenna, thank you for telling me this. It could be very important. I hesitated, not wanting to put her job at risk. But you should be careful. If Robert finds out you're sharing information with me, I know the risk, she said firmly. But what they're doing isn't right. You built this company too, Mrs. Westbrook. You deserve better than this. After she left, I immediately texted James, relaying what Jenna had told me. His reply was immediate. They're destroying evidence. Judge Winters needs to know now. I was halfway through typing a response when my computer screen suddenly went black. I tried rebooting. Nothing. My phone chimed with an email notification from Westbrook IT. System access temporarily suspended. For security review. We apologize for any inconvenience. They were cutting me off, just as things were accelerating. I gathered my purse and headed for the door. If I couldn't work from inside the system, I'd have to find another way. In the hallway, heads turned as I walked past, conversations hushing. News of the investigation had clearly spread. I kept my chin up, my pace steady, ignoring the whispers. That followed me to the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Robert watching from the end of the corridor, his expression unreadable. For a moment, our eyes locked. Husband and wife, business partners, now adversaries in a battle neither of us had anticipated when we'd signed that partnership agreement 2 decades ago. The elevator descended, and I pulled out my phone to call James. Whatever Robert and Victor had been doing in that server room, whatever Mr. V had been instructing them to accelerate, we needed to find out before it was too late. The investigation had officially begun, but so had the cover-up. And I had a sinking feeling that what we'd uncover would be far worse than I'd initially suspected. Judge Eleanor Winters was exactly as I had imagined her. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with the kind of penetrating gaze that had likely unnerved countless corporate executives during her decades on the bench. She sat at the head of the conference table in James's office, reviewing the documents we'd compiled with methodical precision. "These server logs," she said, tapping a printout with one manicured finger, "show massive file deletions on Tuesday, immediately after the notice of investigation was delivered." She looked up at me. "And you're certain these were not routine? System maintenance?" "Absolutely certain," I replied. "Westbrook performs system maintenance on the first Sunday of each month. Any unscheduled data purges would require executive approval." "Which your husband conveniently provided," James added, from his position at the window. "Along with your CFO, Mr. Harlow," Judge Winters made a note, "I've issued preservation orders for all company data. Any further deletions would constitute obstruction." She turned another page in her binder. "Now, about this Russian investment. Group Volkov Ventures. You believe they're connected to the outsourcing plan?" "Yes," I said, leaning forward. "The outsourcing would funnel approximately $15 million back to subsidiaries of Arctica Global, which I suspect is controlled by the same interests behind Volkov Ventures." "Circular financing," the judge murmured. "Potentially problematic, depending on how it was disclosed to shareholders." She closed her binder. "Mrs. Westbrook, I need to be clear about something. This investigation isn't about restoring you to your position regardless of what we find. The clause in your partnership agreement allows for review of potentially unethical decisions, but it doesn't guarantee your reinstatement." "I understand," I said, though the reminder stung. "I'm not doing this to get my job back. I'm doing it because the company we built is being corrupted from within." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "I've scheduled depositions with the board members for tomorrow. Mr. Westbrook and Mr. Harlow will be questioned the following day. Once I've gathered all testimonies, I'll issue a preliminary finding." "And the restructuring?" I asked. "My sources say they're planning to announce it next week." "My office has instructed them to delay any major structural changes until the investigation concludes," Judge Winters said. "If they defy that directive, they'll face significant legal consequences." As we wrapped up the meeting, James walked me to the elevator. "The next 48 hours are critical," he advised. "Robert will be preparing his defense, possibly reaching out to board members to coordinate their stories. Stay away from Westbrook offices and don't engage with anyone connected to the company. They'll be looking for any reason to discredit you." I nodded, though the thought of being completely cut off from the business I'd helped build was painful. "What about the Miyazaki team? Mr. Tanaka specifically requested my involvement in the compliance protocols." "Especially not them," James warned. "Robert could claim you're interfering with company operations to sabotage his leadership. The Miyazaki deal has to proceed without you, for now." The elevator arrived, and I stepped inside, feeling strangely hollow. In fighting to save Westbrook's integrity, I was being forced to abandon the very partnerships I'd worked so hard to build. "One more thing," James said, holding the door open. "Don't go home tonight. Robert's lawyers have probably advised him against contact with you, but emotions are running high. Stay with your sister or at a hotel." The thought hadn't even occurred to me. Where would I sleep if not in my own house? The past week had been so focused on the investigation that I'd barely considered the personal implications of what I'd set in motion. "I can't just abandon my home," I protested. James's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Claire, you've just initiated proceedings that could potentially destroy your husband's career and reputation. This isn't the time to be under the same roof I spent that night at the Parkview, an upscale hotel downtown where visiting Westbrook executives often stayed. The irony wasn't lost on me, using my corporate credit card to pay for a room because I'd essentially made myself homeless by fighting for the company that issued the card. After a restless night, I met Elise for breakfast in the hotel restaurant. My younger sister had been my confidant through this entire ordeal, the only person besides James who knew the full extent of what was happening. "You look terrible," she announced, sliding into the booth across from me. "Good morning to you too," I replied dryly. She studied my face with sisterly concern. "Have you heard from Robert?" "Nothing since yesterday's confrontation at the office." I stirred my coffee absently. "He didn't come home last night either, at least not while I was there packing a bag." "He's probably strategizing with his lawyers," Elise said. "Or with that Meredith person. Are you sure there's nothing going on there?" I shrugged. At this point, I almost don't care. Even if he's not sleeping with her, he chose her over me professionally, which might be worse. Elise reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Claire. No matter how this turns out, you didn't deserve any of it." My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Judge Winters starting board depositions this morning. Stay available but out of sight, as if I had anywhere else to be." For the first time in 20 years, I had a weekday with absolutely nothing to do. No meetings to attend, no decisions to make, no fires to put out. The freedom was disorienting. "Let's go shopping," Elise suggested brightly. "You've been wearing those corporate armor suits for so long, you've forgotten what normal clothes feel like." "I'm in the middle of a legal battle for the soul of my company," I reminded her. "Retail therapy seems a bit frivolous." "Exactly why you need it," she insisted. "You've been all business for too long, Claire. It's time to remember you're more than just Westbrook Industries COO. Ex-COO, I mentally corrected, but I let her drag me to Northridge Mall anyway. For a few hours, I tried to lose myself in the mundane normalcy of trying on clothes, browsing bookstores, pretending I was just another woman having a day out with her sister. We were having lunch in the food court when my phone lit up with a call from James. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Judge Winters just called. The board depositions revealed something troubling. Robert and Victor are planning to announce the restructuring tomorrow morning, direct violation of the judge's orders." "Tomorrow?" My stomach dropped. "But that's too soon for the judge to intervene legally. Yes, they're counting on that. By the time she could file for an injunction, the announcement will have been made. Contracts signed with the Eastern European contractors." "Can't she do something? Delay it somehow?" "She's trying," James assured me. "But they've positioned this as an emergency response to market conditions, claiming any delay would jeopardize the company's stability." A terrible thought occurred to me. "James, if those contractors are connected to Volkov Ventures and they push this restructuring through before the investigation can prove it, then they'll have successfully laundered $20 million through Westbrook, yes." His voice was grim. "The money would be tied up in international contracts, nearly impossible to claw back even if the investigation eventually proved wrongdoing." "We need more time," I said, my mind racing. "The judge needs concrete evidence of the connection between Volkov and Arctica Global before she can issue a binding order to stop the restructuring." "Exactly. And that kind of international corporate verification takes days, sometimes weeks. Robert knows this. It's why they're accelerating the timeline." I glanced at Elise, who was watching me with concern. "What can I do?" "Nothing officially," James said. "But unofficially, if someone were to bring us hard evidence of the connection, before tomorrow morning, Judge Winters could use it to issue an emergency injunction. Where would we get that kind of evidence in less than 24 hours? There was a pause. "I can't advise you to do anything that would violate company policy or legal boundaries, Claire. But hypothetically, the evidence would most likely exist in Victor's files. He handled the due diligence on both Volkov and the restructuring contracts. After hanging up, I explained the situation to Elise. "So you need to break into the company and steal files from the CFO's computer?" She summarized, eyebrows raised. "That's definitely illegal. Not steal," I corrected. "Just verify the connection and inform Judge Winters where to look. She has legal authority to access the files. I just need to point her in the right direction." "And how exactly would you get into the building? Didn't they restrict your access?" I twisted my wedding ring thoughtfully. "To the computer systems, yes. But my key card should still work. It would be suspicious to deactivate the CEO's wife's building access without explanation." Elise looked skeptical. "Even if you get in, how would you access Victor's files? I'm guessing his computer is password protected." I smiled grimly. "Victor uses the same password for everything. His daughter's birthday followed by her initials. I've seen him enter it dozens of times over the years." "Claire?" Elise's voice was worried. "This is risky. If you're caught, if I do nothing, Robert and Victor will funnel $15 million to a shady Russian investment group through fraudulent outsourcing contracts," I said firmly. "Sometimes you have to break the rules to do what's right." That night at precisely 10:30 p.m., I pulled into Westbrook's underground parking garage. Most employees would be gone, but the building was never completely empty. Security guards patrolled hourly, and it wasn't uncommon for executives to work late, especially with a major announcement pending. I'd changed from my casual shopping outfit into a conservative black dress and heels, my usual work attire. If anyone saw me, I needed to look like I belonged. My key card worked on the first try. The main lobby was dimly lit, just security lights illuminating the Westbrook logo on the wall behind reception. I nodded to the night security guard, Wilson, who looked up in surprise. "Mrs. Westbrook, didn't expect to see you this late. Forgot some personal items in my office," I explained with a casual wave. "Won't be long." He nodded, returning to his crossword puzzle without suspicion. I'd been working late nights at Westbrook for 15 years. There was nothing unusual about my presence. I took the elevator to the executive floor, heart pounding against my ribs. The corridor was dark, silent. A cleaning cart stood abandoned outside one of the conference rooms, but there was no sign of its owner. Victor's office was at the end of the hall, past Robert's and what had once been mine. I walked quickly, fighting the surreal feeling of being an intruder in the building I'd helped design. Victor's door was locked, but the executive master key I still carried on my keyring slid in smoothly. Inside, his office was neat to the point of sterility. Desk clear of papers, monitor powered down, even the guest chairs perfectly aligned. Victor's obsession with order had always amused me. Now it made my task more challenging. There would be no convenient papers left out, no hints about where to look. I settled into his chair and powered on his computer, holding my breath as the login screen appeared. I typed in Sophia's birthday, 0417, followed by her initials, SJH, access denied. I frowned, trying again more carefully. Still denied. "Damn it, Victor," I muttered. He'd changed his password. I tried variations. Sophia's birth year instead of day, his wife's birthday, their anniversary. Nothing worked. After the 5th attempt, a warning message appeared. 2 attempts remaining before account lockout. Please contact IT department for assistance. Panic fluttered in my chest. I couldn't risk triggering a security alert. I needed another approach. Victor was ruthlessly organized, but he was also old school in certain ways. Despite the company's move toward cloud storage, he still kept important documents on encrypted external drives, a habit from the early days of Westbrook when we'd been paranoid about industrial espionage. I opened his desk drawers carefully, searching for the sleek black drive he always carried. Not in the top drawer, nor the middle one. The bottom drawer was locked. I sat back, thinking. The key would be somewhere in this office. Victor wouldn't risk carrying it with him and potentially losing it. My eyes fell on the framed photo of Sophia on his credenza, his pride and joy, his brilliant daughter who'd just started medical school. I picked it up, turned it over, and there it was, a small key taped to the back of the frame. The locked drawer contained what I expected, the external drive, nestled in a customized slot. I removed it carefully and plugged it into the computer. A password prompt appeared. I closed my eyes, thinking. If not Sophia's birthday, then what? What else did Victor value enough to use as protection for his most sensitive files? An idea struck me. I typed in the date Westbrook Industries went public, 11/08/2006, the day Victor's stock options had made him a millionaire. The drive unlocked, revealing dozens of neatly organized folders. I scanned them quickly. Budget, 2024, strategic planning, board minutes, tax documentation, Volkov investment. My breath caught. There it was, exactly what I was looking for. I clicked on the folder, revealing another set of subfolders. One was labeled Arctica Contracts. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were contract drafts, email correspondence, and a spreadsheet titled Financial Flows Consolidated. I double-clicked it, and a complex diagram appeared on screen, a flowchart showing money movement from Volkov Ventures into Westbrook, then out to various Arctica Global subsidiaries through the proposed outsourcing contracts. It was all there, in black and white. The smoking gun James and Judge Winters needed. I pulled out my phone to take photos of the screen, documenting the evidence. As I was capturing the third screenshot, a noise from the hallway froze me in place, voices getting closer. I still don't understand why it has to be tomorrow, a woman was saying. Meredith Chen. The legal team says we're taking an unnecessary risk by defying the judge's recommendation. Because if we wait, came Victor's unmistakable baritone, we'll lose the opportunity. The investigation will uncover the connection, and Judge Winters will shut down the restructuring permanently. But if there's something illegal about these contracts, there's nothing illegal, Victor interrupted sharply. Just complications. That would be difficult to explain to someone with Judge Winters' particular biases. Trust me, Meredith, this is in everyone's best interest, including yours. They were coming straight for Victor's office. I had seconds to decide what to do. I quickly closed the spreadsheet, ejected the external drive, and replaced it in the drawer, locking it and returning the key to the back of Sophia's photo. I powered down the computer and glanced around frantically, for somewhere to hide. Victor's office had no connecting door, no closet, nowhere to conceal myself. The voices were right outside now, Victor fumbling with his keys. In desperation, I dropped to the floor and rolled under his desk, pulling the chair in as close as possible to shield me from view. It was a terrible hiding place. If either of them sat down, I'd be discovered instantly. My only hope was that they'd grab whatever they needed and leave quickly. The door opened, and light flooded the room. Victor's Italian leather shoes appeared in my limited view, followed by Meredith's stiletto heels. I just need to grab the final contract drafts for Robert to review tonight, Victor was saying. Then we can head to the Meridian for that drink. He moved toward the desk. I held my breath, pressing myself against the back panel, knees drawn to my chest. He was going to find me. This was how it ended. Caught hiding under a desk like a thief, my credibility destroyed before Judge Winters could even render her findings. Actually, can we take a rain check? Meredith asked suddenly. I've got a splitting headache coming on. I should probably just go home and rest before tomorrow's announcement. Victor paused. Of course. Big day tomorrow. You should be fresh. Their voices moved away from the desk, toward the credenza where Victor presumably kept the contracts. I remained frozen, barely breathing. Robert's expecting these by 9, Victor was saying. After the contracts are signed, Claire's investigation becomes moot. The money will be legally allocated, the restructuring in progress. And if the judge rules against us later? Meredith asked. She might issue some nominal fines, perhaps a shareholder disclosure. Nothing that would undo the restructuring itself. Victor's voice was dismissive. By then, the new organizational structure will be established reality. Claire will have accomplished nothing except revealing herself as a vindictive ex-executive, trying to sabotage her replacement. The casual cruelty of his assessment made my blood boil. They weren't just outmaneuvering me, they were planning to paint me as the villain in this story. I still don't understand why Robert didn't bring her into the Volkov deal from the beginning, Meredith said. If she was such a key partner all these years. Because Claire never would have approved it, Victor answered. She's too cautious, too concerned with regulations and ethical considerations. Robert needed this investment to secure the Asian expansion, and Claire would have blocked it with her endless compliance concerns. There was a pause. Then Meredith asked softly, "Is that why he replaced me with her? Because I'm more flexible about these things?" Victor chuckled. "Let's just say Robert appreciated your understanding of business realities. Your qualifications are impressive, of course, but your willingness to pursue aggressive growth strategies aligned better with his vision than Claire's excessive caution." Their voices moved toward the door. I heard papers shuffling, Victor collecting the contracts they'd come for. "We'll meet in the boardroom at 7:30 tomorrow," Victor said. "The announcement goes out at 9, contracts signed by 10. By the time the markets close, the restructuring will be irreversible." "And Claire?" Meredith asked. "What happens to her?" "That's Robert's problem," Victor replied indifferently. "Though between us, I doubt their marriage survives this. Claire's not the type to forgive betrayal, professional or personal." The door closed behind them, leaving me alone in the darkened office, still crouched uncomfortably under the desk. I waited a full 5 minutes before cautiously emerging, legs stiff, mind racing with what I'd just overheard. They were moving faster than even James had anticipated. By this time tomorrow, the restructuring would be complete. The money laundered through international contracts. My investigation rendered pointless. I had the evidence now, the screenshots on my phone showing the connection between Volkov and Arctica. But would it be enough for Judge Winters to issue an emergency injunction overnight? I slipped out of Victor's office, locking the door behind me. The executive floor remained deserted, most of the offices dark. As I moved toward the elevator, a light caught my eye, Robert's office at the end of the hall. The door was ajar, a soft glow spilling into the corridor. I hesitated. I should leave immediately, get the evidence to James and Judge Winters. But something pulled me toward that light. Perhaps a need for closure, or simple curiosity about what Robert was doing so late. I approached cautiously, peering through the partially open door. Robert sat at his desk, back to me, shoulders slumped. In a posture of exhaustion I recognized from our most difficult years building the company. Before him were spread what looked like the contractual documents Victor had just delivered. I must have made some small noise, because he suddenly stiffened and turned. Our eyes met, his widening in shock. "Claire," he said, half rising from his chair. "What are you doing here?" For a moment I considered lying, claiming I'd come for personal items, as I'd told Wilson. But standing there, facing the man who'd been my partner in business and in life for over 2 decades, I couldn't summon the energy for more deception. "I know about Volkov and Arctica," I said quietly. "I know what you and Victor are doing with the restructuring." The color drained from his face. "You've been spying on company business? That's grounds for what, Robert? Firing me? You've already done that." "Divorce? We're probably heading there anyway." I stepped fully into his office, closing the door behind me. "I have evidence of the money flow between Volkov and the Arctica subsidiaries. Judge Winters will have it by morning." He sank back into his chair, the fight visibly draining out of him. "You don't understand the position we're in. Westbrook needs the Miyazaki partnership to access the Asian markets, and Miyazaki demanded technological capabilities we don't currently have. The Russian investment and the restructuring are necessary steps. Necessary? I interrupted. Laundering 15 million through fraudulent outsourcing contracts is necessary? Firing our experienced engineers and replacing them with shell companies is necessary? It's not that simple. It is that simple, I insisted. You're violating company ethics, shareholder trust, possibly federal regulations. And for what? To push me out? To prove your vision for the company is better than mine? Robert ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking every bit his 48 years. This isn't about you, Claire. It was never about pushing you out. It was about survival. Whose survival? Yours as CEO? Because the company was doing fine, before you decided to get into bed with questionable Russian investors. Volkov Ventures is our gateway to the European market expansion. Without them, we lose the Miyazaki deal. Without Miyazaki, we lose the Asian manufacturing contracts. It's all connected. His voice took on a desperate edge. I'm trying to secure Westbrook's future. I studied him. This man I'd thought I knew better than anyone. By destroying its foundation, by corrupting everything we built it on. Sometimes compromises are necessary. This isn't compromise, Robert. It's corruption. I moved toward the door, then paused. The restructuring announcement tomorrow won't happen. Judge Winters will have an injunction by morning. Whatever you and Victor and your Russian friends had planned, it's over. His expression hardened. You'll destroy everything. Years of work, hundreds of jobs, our entire expansion strategy. All because your pride was hurt when the board decided we needed new leadership. No, I corrected him softly. I'm saving what's left of Westbrook's integrity. The company we built was never just about profit or expansion. It was about creating something meaningful, something we could be proud of. I met his gaze directly. I still care about that, even if you don't. I left him there, surrounded by his contracts and compromises, and walked out of Westbrook Industries with my head high. In my pocket, my phone held the evidence that would stop tomorrow's announcement and force a full investigation of the Volkov-Arctica connection. The battle for Westbrook's soul wasn't over. But for the first time since that terrible board meeting, I felt certain I was fighting for the right cause, not just my position or my pride, but the very principles on which we'd built our company. As I drove away from the building that had been my second home for 15 years, I thought about Victor's casual prediction that my marriage wouldn't survive this conflict. He was probably right. Some betrayals cut too deep for reconciliation. But Westbrook Industries might still be saved. And sometimes, that had to be enough. Morning arrived with a flurry of text messages from James. Judge Winters had reviewed my evidence overnight and was filing for an emergency injunction to halt the restructuring announcement. Robert and Victor had been ordered to appear in her chambers at 7 a.m., a calculated half-hour before their planned board meeting. I sat in the hotel's restaurant, picking at a breakfast I couldn't taste, watching the minutes tick by on my phone. At precisely 7 a.m., I imagined Robert and Victor entering Judge Winters' chambers, confident they could charm or intimidate their way past her objections. By 7:15, they would be realizing the depth of the evidence against them. By 7:30, the time they'd planned to begin their board meeting, they would be watching their carefully constructed plans crumble. At 7:42, my phone rang. James. It's done, he said without preamble. Judge Winters issued a full-stop order on the GE, restructuring and any contracts related to Arctica Global. She's also frozen all funds connected to the Volkov investment pending further investigation. Relief washed through me, so powerful I had to grip the edge of the table. Did Robert and Victor show up? Oh yes. Quite the scene from what I hear. Victor tried to argue that the evidence was obtained illegally, but the judge shut that down immediately. She pointed out that the screenshots merely directed her where to look, her subpoena power. Did the rest? And Robert? James paused. He was subdued. Didn't say much, apparently. Judge Winters has scheduled formal hearings beginning tomorrow. You'll need to testify, of course. Of course, I agreed, though the thought of publicly revealing all that had happened, both professionally and personally, made my stomach clench. There's something else, James said, his tone shifting. Something that came up during the judge's questioning. It seems the Volkov connection goes deeper than we thought. Robert admitted that Westbrook has been serving as a shell for Russian investments in several American tech companies over the past 18 months. I nearly dropped my phone. What? That's beyond what even I suspected. Those kinds of transactions could violate federal regulations on foreign investment in critical technology. Exactly. Judge Winters has contacted the Securities and Exchange Commission. This is expanding beyond a simple contract dispute or questionable restructuring. After hanging up, I sat frozen in my seat, trying to process this new information. 18 months of secret deals with Russian investors, using Westbrook as a pass-through entity for foreign money into American tech companies. The potential legal consequences were staggering. But what struck me even more was the timeline. 18 months ago, Robert and I had still been a united front, still sharing our dreams and challenges, still sleeping in the same bed. When had he started keeping such massive secrets from me? When had our partnership, in business and in marriage, become so broken that he could conduct shadow operations without my knowledge? My phone buzzed with another call. A number I didn't recognize, I answered cautiously. Claire? It's Meredith Chen. I nearly hung up. What could Robert's hand-picked replacement possibly want with me now? I know this is unexpected, she continued quickly, but I think we should talk. In person. There are things you should know that didn't come up in the judge's chambers this morning. My instinct was to refuse, to tell her that whatever manipulations she and Robert had planned were irrelevant now. But curiosity won out. Where and when? The coffee shop on Linden Street. 30 minutes and... Come alone, please. The cafe was busy with morning commuters when I arrived, but Meredith was easy to spot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, her sleek bob framing a face that looked considerably more strained than when I'd last seen her. She stood as I approached, gesturing to a cup already waiting for me. Black coffee, 1 sugar. Robert mentioned it was your standard order. The casual reference to my husband knowing my coffee preference irritated me, but I sat down, deciding to get straight to the point. What did you want to discuss, Meredith? She glanced around the crowded cafe before leaning forward. I'm resigning from Westbrook, effective immediately. I've already emailed my formal notice to the board. That was fast, I observed coolly. Yesterday you were preparing to announce a major restructuring as the new COO. Today you're jumping ship. I never signed up for what Robert and Victor were doing, she said, a defensive edge to her voice. The position they offered me, the COO role, that was legitimate. At least, I thought it was. I had no idea about the Russian money or the Arctica shell companies until yesterday. I studied her carefully, looking for signs of deception. You expect me to believe Robert kept you completely in the dark about the restructuring's true purpose while grooming you to replace me? Not completely in the dark, she admitted. I knew they wanted someone more aggressive about international expansion, someone willing to streamline operations. But I thought that meant normal corporate cost-cutting, not laundering foreign investments. Then why are you telling me this? Why not take this to Judge Winters? Meredith took a sip of her coffee, her composure slipping slightly. I already have. I gave a statement this morning after Robert and Victor left. But there's more. Something I didn't tell the judge because it's personal. About you and Robert. My stomach tightened. I'm not interested in discussions about my marriage. This isn't about your marriage exactly. It's about why Robert was so determined to push you out. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a manila folder. These are copies of emails between Robert and Victor from approximately 8 months ago. They concern you specifically. I hesitated before taking the folder. How did you get these? Victor's assistant. She's been uncomfortable with certain aspects of his leadership for some time. When the investigation became public, she decided to share her concerns. I opened the folder to find a series of email printouts, all exchanges between my husband and our CFO. The subject lines were innocuous: Strategic Planning Q3 and Leadership Summit, but the content was anything but. Victor, one read, "We need to accelerate the leadership transition plan." Claire's becoming increasingly problematic regarding the VV arrangement. Yesterday, she questioned the source verification documentation again. We can't risk her connecting the dots on this. Another, dated a month later. C continues pushing back on the Asian market strategy. This isn't just difference of opinion anymore. It's active obstruction of board-approved initiatives. The advisory role solution we discussed might be our best option. She retains her shares but loses operational authority. My hands trembled, slightly as I read through the exchanges, watching months of my husband's duplicity unfold in clinical corporate language. Robert had been systematically building a case against me, documenting every instance where I'd questioned the Volkov dealings or raised compliance concerns about the Asian expansion. There's one more, Meredith said quietly. From about 6 weeks ago, it's worse. I turned to the final page where Robert had written, "Judge Williams' wife serves on the ethics committee with Claire. If she mentions our Russian investors to him, even casually, we could face regulatory inquiry. The timeline needs to be moved up. Chen is ready. Execute the transition plan at the next board meeting. Judge Williams." The name struck a chord. Alexander. Williams was a federal judge who specialized in foreign investment cases. His wife Diane and I had served together on a corporate ethics panel, and I'd mentioned some of my concerns about anonymous foreign investments to her during a lunch, not naming Westbrook specifically, but discussing the issue in general terms. That conversation had been Robert's trigger. Not poor performance, not strategic differences, not even the lies he'd told me about needing fresh perspectives. He'd pushed me out because he was afraid I might inadvertently expose his illegal activities through my professional network. Closed the folder, a strange calm settling over me. Why show me these? What do you gain? Meredith looked uncomfortable. Honestly? A clear conscience. And maybe... She hesitated. I admired you, Claire. Your reputation in the industry, your ethical leadership. When Robert approached me about the COO position, I was honored at the chance to work with Westbrook. I never intended to be part of destroying what you built. I wasn't sure I believed her completely, but the emails spoke for themselves. Robert's betrayal was even more calculated, more coldly premeditated than I'd imagined. Have you spoken to Robert since the judge's order this morning? I asked. She shook her head. No one can reach him. After the meeting with Judge Winters, he disappeared. Victor's been trying to contact him without success. That didn't sound like Robert. Whatever his flaws, he'd never been one to abandon ship during a crisis. Thank you for these, I said, tapping the folder. I'll make sure Judge Winters sees them. As I stood to leave, Meredith looked up at me, her expression troubled. There's something else you should know. The Miyazaki deal is real, and it's crucial for Westbrook's future. Without it, the company loses its foothold in Asian markets for at least 3 years. Your compliance protocols were actually the key to securing their trust. Mr. Tanaka emphasized that repeatedly. I absorbed this information silently. The Miyazaki partnership had been Robert's obsession for years, his gateway to Asian expansion. It was ironic that my cautious approach, the very quality he'd grown to resent, had been what impressed them most. The deal doesn't have to die because of what Robert and Victor did, Meredith continued. Westbrook still needs it. The employees, who had nothing to do with this mess, still need it. Why are you telling me this? Because despite everything, I think you still care about Westbrook's future. She met my gaze directly. And because you're the only one who can salvage this situation now. I left the cafe with my mind churning. The Miyazaki partnership, the Russian investments, Robert's disappearance, the emails documenting months of calculated betrayal. It was too much to process at once. I called James from my car, updating him on the meeting with Meredith and the explosive emails she'd shared. "This corroborates everything the investigation has uncovered," he said after I finished. "Robert wasn't just pushing you out for strategic differences. He was actively hiding illegal activities and afraid you'd expose them." "Unintentionally," I clarified. "I never suspected anything on this scale." "It doesn't matter. The intent was to silence you one way or another." I could hear him shuffling papers. "Judge Winters wants you in her chambers at 2 this afternoon. Bring those emails. They're crucial evidence." "And what about Robert?" "Meredith says no one can reach him." "Let him run," James said dismissively. "It only makes him look guiltier." But as I hung up, an uneasy feeling settled over me. Running wasn't Robert's style. In 22 years of marriage, through every business crisis and personal challenge, he'd always faced problems head-on, sometimes aggressively. Disappearing now, when everything was unraveling. It didn't fit. I found myself driving toward our home in Oakwood Heights, the sprawling colonial that had once represented our shared success. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed Robert's car parked haphazardly near the front steps, one wheel on the manicured lawn, so unlike his usual precision. The house was silent when I entered, no sign of Maria or any of the regular household staff. "Robert?" I called, moving cautiously through the foyer. No response. I checked his office first, empty, though a half-finished glass of scotch sat on his desk. The kitchen was untouched, the bedroom undisturbed. Finally, I headed for the sunroom at the back of the house, Robert's favorite spot for thinking through difficult problems. He was there, sitting motionless in his favorite leather chair, staring out at the garden. He didn't turn when I entered, though he must have heard me. "I wondered if you'd come," he said finally, his voice flat. "After this morning's legal apocalypse." I remained in the doorway, maintaining distance. "No one could reach you. Even Victor's been trying." Robert gave a humorless laugh. "Victor is currently negotiating an immunity deal with the SEC. Apparently he's decided I'm a convenient scapegoat for everything." "Is he wrong?" He turned then, and I was shocked by his appearance. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, still wearing yesterday's rumpled suit. "Not entirely," he admitted. "But it wasn't supposed to go this far. The Russian money was supposed to be a temporary solution, just enough to secure the Miyazaki deal and the Asian expansion." "And pushing me out? Was that a temporary solution too?" Pain flickered across his face. "I convinced myself it was necessary, that your ethics would endanger everything we'd worked for, that you wouldn't understand the compromises needed to secure Westbrook's future. You're right. I don't understand using our company to launder foreign investments. I don't understand lying to shareholders and the board, and I certainly don't understand plotting against your wife and business partner for months because she might accidentally expose your illegal activities." "I was trapped," he said quietly. "Once the first Volkov investment came in, they kept pushing for more access, more influence. They had leverage. If they pulled their funding, we'd lose Miyazaki, and Westbrook would face a liquidity crisis. At least, that's what I told myself." I moved further into the room, but didn't sit. "Why are you here, Robert? Why did you disappear? After the judge's order?" He reached for a folder on the side table, handing it to me without meeting my eyes. "To finish this. All of it." Inside was a typed letter of resignation as CEO of Westbrook Industries, effective immediately, along with documents transferring his voting rights on the board to me. "You're resigning?" I couldn't hide my shock. Westbrook was Robert's identity, his life's work. "It's over, Claire. The SEC investigation will uncover everything. Criminal charges are likely. The best I can do now is try to protect the company by removing myself completely. I stared at the documents, emotion tangling in my chest, anger, vindication, and underneath it all, a strange, hollow sadness for what we'd lost. And transferring your voting rights to me. Why? Because you were right all along. He finally looked up, meeting my gaze directly. About the ethics, about the risks, about everything. Westbrook needs your leadership now more than ever, especially if there's any hope of salvaging the Miyazaki partnership. You think I can just step back in and fix the mess you've made? The audacity was breathtaking. After you systematically undermined me, publicly humiliated me, and tried to push me into some meaningless advisory role? No, he said quietly. I don't expect you to fix anything, but the company deserves a chance to survive this, and you're the only one who can give it that chance. I sat down across from him, studying the man I'd spent half my life with, the brilliant, ambitious, deeply flawed man who'd built a company with me and then betrayed everything we stood for. Have you spoken to a lawyer? I asked finally. He nodded. This morning, the outlook isn't good. Securities fraud, wire fraud, possibly even charges under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Best case scenario, I face significant financial penalties. Worst case, prison time. The reality of it hit me like a physical blow. Prison. Robert Westbrook, who'd graced the covers of business magazines, who'd been named Entrepreneur of the Year twice, who'd built a technology empire from nothing, facing criminal charges and possible incarceration. What about the house? Our assets? I've instructed my attorney to keep everything in your name. The SEC will likely freeze my personal accounts during the investigation, but I've made arrangements to protect your financial interests. Such clinical language for the dismantling of our life together. And us? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. What happens to our marriage in this scenario you've so carefully planned? Pain flashed across his face. I assumed that was already over. After everything I've done. The sunroom fell silent, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the floor. Outside, the gardener was trimming the hedges, oblivious to the drama unfolding within. A marriage disintegrating, a company in crisis, 2 decades of partnership ending in betrayal and legal proceedings. I should go, I said, rising. Judge Winters is expecting me at 2. Robert nodded, not meeting my eyes. Will you tell her about my resignation? Yes. And about these. I held up the folder of incriminating emails Meredith had provided. She needs the complete picture of what's been happening at Westbrook. He glanced at the folder, then back at me, realization dawning. You have evidence I didn't know about. Emails between you and Victor, discussing your plans to remove me because I might accidentally expose the Russian connections. My voice was steady, controlled. It seems your strategic alliance with Victor wasn't as solid as you thought. Robert closed his eyes briefly, defeat written in every line of his body. I deserve whatever's coming. At the doorway, I paused, looking back at the broken man who'd once been my partner in every sense of the word. Why, Robert? After everything we built together, after 22 years, was it worth it? He stared out at the garden, silent for so long I thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible. I told myself it was about Westbrook's future, about securing our legacy. But the truth? He looked up, his eyes hollow. I was afraid of failing, of watching competitors pass us by, of becoming irrelevant. And somewhere along the way, I started seeing your caution as an obstacle rather than a balance. It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd said to me in months. Not an excuse, not a justification, just the painful truth of how ambition had corrupted everything he touched. Goodbye, Robert, I said quietly, and walked away from the sunroom, from the husband who'd betrayed me, from the marriage that couldn't survive what he'd done. As I drove toward Judge Winter's chambers, my phone rang. James again. "Where are you?" he demanded. "The judge is expecting us in 45 minutes. "I'm on my way," I assured him, "and I have Robert's resignation letter, along with documents transferring his voting rights to me." "He's resigned?" James sounded stunned. "That's unexpected and strategically significant. Where did you get these documents?" "From Robert himself. I just left him at the house." "Claire," James's voice sharpened, "you went to see him alone? Without counsel? After everything that's happened?" "I needed answers," I said simply. "And now I have them." As I hung up, I realized I was driving not toward the courthouse but toward Westbrook Industries headquarters. Without conscious decision, I'd taken the familiar route I'd traveled for 15 years. The building loomed ahead, glass and steel gleaming in the afternoon sun, the physical manifestation of everything Robert and I had built together, now endangered. By his deception and greed, I parked in my old spot, still labeled C. Westbrook COO, despite everything that had happened. As I walked through the lobby, employees stopped and stared, conversations halting mid-sentence. I nodded politely but didn't slow my pace. The executive floor was buzzing with tension when I stepped off the elevator. Through the glass wall of the boardroom, I could see most of the senior leadership team huddled together, faces grim. News of the judge's order and the SEC involvement had clearly spread. Victor was at the head of the table, gesturing emphatically. When he caught sight of me through the glass, he froze mid-sentence, the color draining from his face. I didn't stop, continuing past the boardroom toward what had once been my office. Meredith's personal items were already gone, I noticed. She'd wasted no time clearing out after her resignation. Standing in that space, surrounded by the trappings of corporate power I'd fought so hard to achieve, and then lost so abruptly, I felt a strange sense of clarity washing over me. This office, this position, this company, they had defined me for so long. But they weren't the sum total of who I was. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Where are you? Judge waiting." I took one last look around the office, then turned and walked back toward the elevator. As I passed the boardroom again, Victor emerged, blocking my path. "Claire," he said, his usual confidence noticeably diminished. "I wasn't expecting to see you here today." "Clearly," I replied coolly. "I just came to get a few personal items before my meeting with Judge Winters. And to deliver this." I handed him a copy of Robert's resignation letter. "Effective immediately. You'll need to call an emergency board meeting." Victor scanned the document, his expression shifting from surprise to calculation. Always the opportunist, already considering how to position himself in the post-Robert era. "And the voting rights transfer?" he asked, noting the second page. "He's giving you control of his shares?" "Temporarily," I said, "until the investigation is complete and the board can determine Westbrook's path forward." Victor studied me, trying to gauge my intentions. "And what is that path, Claire? If you're taking back control, what happens to the current leadership? To the strategic direction?" It was a loaded question, and we both knew it. Victor was asking if I planned to clean house, to dismantle everything Robert had put in place, to exact revenge for my ousting. "That," I said carefully, "will depend on what Judge Winters finds in her investigation, and on what the board decides is in the best interest of the company." I stepped around him, continuing toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard him call, "The Miyazaki deal." I paused, turning back. "Will proceed, if possible, with proper compliance measures in place." Relief flashed across his face. Whatever else Victor had done, he understood the importance of that partnership for Westbrook's future. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a final glimpse of the executive floor where I'd spent so much of my professional life. Whatever happened next, with Judge Winters' investigation, with the SEC inquiry, with the board's response to Robert's resignation, I knew Westbrook Industries would never be the same, and neither would I. 3 weeks. That's how long it took. For Judge Winters to complete her investigation, compile her findings, and deliver what the business press had taken to calling the Westbrook verdict. I spent those weeks in a strange limbo, still technically the holder of Robert's voting rights, but with no official position at the company. The board had appointed an interim CEO, Lawrence Patel from our European division, someone untainted by the Russian investment scandal. I kept my distance, working from home or James's office, providing information when requested but otherwise staying out of day-to-day operations. Robert had moved out of our house the day after his resignation, taking only personal items and clothes. According to James, he'd rented a small apartment downtown and was cooperating fully with both Judge Winters and the SEC investigators. We hadn't spoken since that final conversation in the sunroom. The morning of Judge Winters' announcement, I dressed with particular care. A charcoal suit I'd always considered my armor, pearl earrings that had been a gift from my mother, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. Whatever the verdict, I wanted to face it with dignity. James met me in the lobby of the courthouse, his expression unreadable. Ready? I nodded, though ready wasn't quite the right word. How could anyone be ready to hear the official accounting of their life's work being corrupted, their marriage being dismantled, their professional identity being redefined in a single judgment? Judge Winters' chambers were already crowded when we entered. Lawrence Patel and several board members, Victor and his attorney, the SEC representatives, even Mr. Tanaka from Miyazaki, who nodded respectfully in my direction. Robert sat alone. In the corner, his once imposing presence diminished in a suit that seemed too large for him now. Thank you all for coming, Judge Winters began, her voice precise and authoritative. I've completed my investigation under the independent review clause of the original Westbrook Industries partnership agreement. My findings are extensive, but I'll summarize the key points. She opened a leather-bound folder. First, regarding the removal of Claire Westbrook as COO. I find this action was taken in bad faith, motivated not by legitimate business concerns, but by an effort to prevent disclosure of questionable financial arrangements. The evidence, including internal communications between Robert Westbrook and Victor Harlow, clearly establishes this intent. Victor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His immunity deal with the SEC had saved him from criminal charges, but his reputation was in tatters. Second, Judge Winters continued, regarding the Volkov Ventures investment, I find substantial evidence that Westbrook Industries was being used as a conduit for Russian capital into restricted American technology sectors, in violation of federal disclosure requirements. This activity appears to have begun approximately 18 months ago and expanded significantly in recent months. She turned a page. Third, the planned restructuring that would have outsourced key operations to Arctica Global subsidiaries constituted an improper related party transaction designed to conceal the flow of capital back to Russian interests. This represents a serious breach of fiduciary duty to shareholders. The room was utterly silent as she delivered her verdict. I kept my eyes forward, not daring to look at Robert or Victor. Finally, and most seriously, I find that the board of directors failed in its oversight responsibilities, allowing these activities to continue unchecked for months. While some board members were clearly more involved than others, all bear responsibility for inadequate governance. Judge Winters closed her folder, surveying the room. Based on these findings, I am ordering the following remedies under the partnership agreement's provisions. 1. The removal of Claire Westbrook as COO is invalidated. She may return to that position immediately if she chooses, or she may nominate a replacement subject to board approval. 2. Robert Westbrook's resignation as CEO is accepted and made permanent. His voting rights, currently held by Claire Westbrook, will remain under her control until the board establishes new governance protocols approved by this court. 3. The current board of directors is dissolved. A new board will be constituted within 30 days, with at least half its members being independent directors with no prior relationship to Westbrook Industries. 4. All contracts and investments related to Volkov Ventures and Arctica Global are terminated immediately. Westbrook Industries will cooperate fully with the SEC investigation regarding these matters. She paused, looking directly at me. Mrs. Westbrook, do you understand these remedies and accept the responsibility they entail? All eyes turned to me. I could feel Robert's gaze most acutely, though I didn't meet it. I do, Your Honor, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Mr. Patel, as interim CEO, do you commit to implementing these changes? Lawrence nodded firmly. Yes, Your Honor, without reservation. Very well. Judge Winters gathered her papers. I'll issue my formal written ruling this afternoon. This investigation is concluded, though the SEC proceedings will continue separately. She fixed Robert with a stern look. Mr. Westbrook, I suggest you continue your full cooperation with federal authorities. It may be the only mitigating factor in your favor. As the room emptied, I remained seated, trying to process everything that had happened. I had won, completely, unequivocally. I could return to Westbrook as COO if I wanted, with more control than ever before. The corrupt board was dissolved, the Russian money severed, everything I'd fought for had been granted. So why did it feel so hollow? James touched my shoulder gently. Claire, everyone's leaving. I looked up to see Robert standing at the door, hesitating, as if wanting to speak to me. Our eyes met briefly before he turned and walked away, shoulders bent under the weight of his disgrace. Are you all right? James asked. I'm not sure, I admitted. It doesn't feel like a victory. That's because it isn't one, not really. There's no winning in a situation like this, just surviving with your integrity intact. He helped me gather my things. So, what now? Will you go back as COO? It was the question I'd been wrestling with for weeks. Return to Westbrook, to the company I'd helped build from nothing? Or walk away, start fresh somewhere my professional identity wasn't tangled with a failed marriage and a public scandal? I don't know yet, I said honestly. Outside the courthouse, Lawrence Patel was waiting by his car. Claire, he called, approaching with a tentative smile. Do you have a moment? I nodded, curious. Lawrence and I had always had a good working relationship, though we weren't particularly close. As head of European operations, he'd been insulated from the worst of Robert and Victor's schemes. I wanted to discuss next steps, he said, getting straight to the point. The judge's ruling gives you the authority to return as COO immediately, but I sensed some hesitation in there. It's complicated, I admitted. Westbrook has been my life for 20 years, but after everything that's happened, I understand. Lawrence glanced around, then lowered his voice. There's something else you should know. The Miyazaki partnership is still viable. My heart jumped. Even after all this? Mr. Tanaka was impressed by how quickly the company moved to address the corruption once it was exposed. And frankly, by your principled stand. He smiled slightly. He mentioned something about your compliance. Protocols being exactly what convinced him Westbrook was a trustworthy partner in the first place. It was a small vindication. The very caution Robert had come to resent had saved one of our most important relationships. The thing is, Lawrence continued, their legal team insists on working with you specifically. They trust your ethics, your attention to detail. If you don't return to Westbrook, I'm not sure we can save the deal. That's quite a card to play, Lawrence. He shrugged unapologetically. It's the truth. We need you, Claire. Not just for Miyazaki, but to rebuild everything that's been damaged. The company culture, the ethical foundation, the trust of our employees and investors. And if I'm not ready to make that commitment, then we'll respect that decision. But I hope you'll at least consider a temporary arrangement. Perhaps as a special advisor focusing specifically on the Miyazaki partnership. Give yourself time to decide about the longer term. It was a reasonable compromise. I could help secure Westbrook's future without immediately committing to returning full-time. I'll think about it, I promised. Back at the hotel that had become my temporary home, I found a package waiting, a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a single document, the original partnership agreement Robert and I had signed 20 years ago, complete with the hidden clause that had ultimately saved me. A note was paperclipped to it, written in Robert's distinctive handwriting. This belongs to you now. Whatever you decide about Westbrook's future, never forget that you were right all along. I'm sorry I lost sight of what we built together. I sat on the edge of the bed, the yellowed pages in my lap, memories flooding back. Robert and I barely 30, signing this document in our first real office, believing we were creating something that would last forever. The late nights brainstorming product features, the exhilaration of our first major client, the pride when we moved into the gleaming headquarters building we'd designed together. Westbrook Industries had been our shared dream, our shared accomplishment. Now it was broken, tainted by betrayal and illegal dealings. Could it be saved? More importantly, did I want to be the one to save it? My phone rang. Elise, checking in as she had daily since the scandal broke. The verdict's in, I told her. Judge Winters ruled in my favor on everything. I can go back as COO whenever I want. Congratulations, she said, though her tone was cautious. Is that what you want? I don't know, I admitted. Lawrence Patel offered a compromise, working temporarily as an advisor on the Miyazaki partnership. It would give me time to decide. And Robert? Cooperating with the SEC, possibly facing criminal charges. I sighed. It's all such a mess, Elise. 22 years of marriage, 20 years building Westbrook, and it ends like this. It doesn't have to be the end, she said gently. Of Westbrook being part of your life, I mean. The company isn't just Robert. Isn't it, though? For better or worse, Robert's vision shaped Westbrook. His ambition drove our growth. His compromises corrupted our foundation. I ran my fingers over the partnership agreement. I'm not sure I can separate the company from the man anymore. Then don't, Elise said simply. Build something new instead. Her words stayed with me as I prepared for my final meeting with James to discuss next steps. I gathered the files that had accumulated over the past month, evidence of corruption, legal briefs, Judge Winters' preliminary findings, and was about to leave when my phone chimed with a text. It was from Jenna, my former assistant. Mrs. Westbrook. I hope it's okay to reach out. There's something happening at the office you should know about. The staff is organizing a petition asking for your return. Over 300 signatures already. People miss your leadership. Attached was a photo of a conference room filled with employees, many holding signs with variations of "Bring back Claire" and "Restore Westbrook's integrity." I stared at the image, unexpected emotion tightening my throat. These were the people who'd built Westbrook with me, the engineers, the marketers, the support staff. They hadn't been part of Robert and Victor's schemes. They'd just been doing their jobs, believing in the company's mission. Didn't I owe them something? Didn't I owe myself the chance to reclaim what we'd built, to transform it into something worthy of their trust? James was waiting in his office when I arrived, documents spread across his desk. I've been reviewing the governance restructuring Judge Winters ordered, he said as I sat down. You'll have significant influence over the new board composition. We should discuss potential candidates. I'm not going back as COO, I interrupted. Quietly. James looked up, surprise evident in his expression. You're turning down the position? After everything you went through to protect your place at Westbrook? Not exactly. I opened my briefcase and withdrew a folder containing the proposal I'd stayed up half the night drafting. I'm going to accept Lawrence's offer to advise on the Miyazaki partnership, but only for the next 90 days. During that time, I want to implement a different kind of restructuring. I handed him the folder. This is my vision for Westbrook's future. A complete reorganization of the executive team, new transparency protocols, an ethics committee with actual teeth, and most importantly, a transformation of our corporate structure to ensure no single person, including me, ever has the kind of unchecked power Robert wielded. James skimmed the document, eyebrows rising. This is comprehensive. And the new COO you're proposing, Diane Rodriguez? Your former director of compliance? I nodded. Diane understands Westbrook's operations thoroughly, and she was one of the few who questioned the Volkov investment from the beginning. More importantly, she has the ethical foundation the company needs right now. And you? What role do you see for yourself in this new Westbrook? Chairperson of the new board, focusing on strategic direction and ethical governance, not day-to-day operations. I leaned forward. Westbrook needs to be more than Robert's vision or my countervision. It needs to become something better than either of us imagined. James studied me for a long moment. You know, most people in your position would either seize, control completely, or walk away entirely. This middle path, it's unusual. So is having the chance to rebuild something you helped create, I said simply. I don't want to run from Westbrook's problems, but I also don't want to be defined by them anymore. This gives all of us, a chance at something new. The next morning, I returned to Westbrook Industries for the first time since Judge Winters had announced her verdict. The lobby fell silent as I walked in, then erupted in spontaneous applause. Employees I'd worked with for years approached to express their support, their relief at seeing me back in the building. Lawrence met me at the elevator, his face breaking into a genuine smile. I take it you've made your decision? I have, I confirmed. But not quite the one you expected. In the boardroom, I presented my restructuring plan to Lawrence and the remaining senior leaders. There was surprise, some resistance, but ultimately a sense of relief that someone had a clear vision for moving forward. This will take time to implement fully, I concluded. The new board needs to be carefully selected. Diane needs to assemble her executive team. The ethics committee needs to establish its authority. But if we start today, Westbrook can emerge from this crisis stronger and more principled than before. Lawrence was the first to voice his support. I think this is exactly what the company needs. A fresh start with the benefit of your experience, guiding the transition. One by one, the others agreed. By lunchtime, the plan was approved in principle, pending the formal establishment of the new board. As the meeting broke up, I found myself standing alone at the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Robert was facing the consequences of his actions. Our marriage was effectively over, though the legal formalities would take time. The company we'd built together was being transformed into something neither of us had originally envisioned. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but I immediately recognized Robert's style. I saw the announcement about the restructuring plan. It's brilliant. Westbrook deserves this second chance, even if I don't. I didn't respond. There would be time for conversations with Robert later, difficult, necessary conversations about divorce proceedings, about his legal situation, about the untangling of our shared life. But those belonged to the future. Today was about Westbrook's new beginning. Diane Rodriguez found me still at the window. Claire, do you have a moment? If I'm going to do this, there are some things we need to discuss. I smiled, turning away from the view. Of course, let's get started. As we walked to my former office, now soon to be Diane's, employees stopped to watch, curiosity and hope in their expressions. They didn't know the details yet, but they sensed that something had changed, that the company was being reborn in the aftermath of betrayal. I caught a glimpse of myself reflected in the glass wall of the conference room, standing tall, moving forward, no longer defined by what I'd lost, but by what I was helping to create. The hidden clause in that yellowed partnership agreement hadn't just given me the power to expose corruption, it had given me the chance to reimagine what Westbrook Industries could become. Sometimes the most painful betrayals lead to the most necessary transformations. I had lost a husband, but I was reclaiming my vision. I had been forced out of the company I helped build, only to return with the authority to rebuild it better. The hidden clause had been my salvation. Not because it restored what was taken, but because it created the opportunity for something new to emerge from the ashes of what was lost, and that was a victory worth fighting for. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.